The fortunes favor us by not denying us the glory of this kill after all. The monkeys cannot flee in time. Executor Oxness stood on the command deck of the Rising Comet, surrounded by various holodisplays of the entire star system, as well as the planet that was their destination and the human force between them. One of his officers looked up from their station onto the walkway their superior was standing upon, making it look like some of them were sitting in pits that were half a level below the intended floor for this room. My lord, the High Marshal's orders were not to engage their forces, and let the humans and their allies withdraw. The High Marshal didn't give this command to me for nothing. His stated intent was to end this charade without starting a war. What could be better at achieving that goal as a show of force and a lesson to those who would meddle in our affairs? The executor grimaced, wrinkling the skin on his nose. But my lord, would that not risk provoking the rest of them to change their stance? They are pulling out already. If we attack them now, we show the rest of the galaxy who we are, and that they need not fear the naked monkeys. Just look at them, running the moment there was a threat of escalation. Sure, they are ready to fight to the last drop of blood, all right. The blood of our misguided kin, that is. But never once did they take to the field of battle themselves. All that supposed power they wield. That reputation of theirs about never losing one of their battleships. Those do not fears, or whatever they are called. He pointed at the center of the task force in their path, where a singular GTU dreadnought was sitting surrounded by his escorts. Because they always flee the moment they no longer have an overwhelming advantage, or run out of others to throw between themselves and their enemies. It is time to expose them for all to see, as the craven pushovers and manipulators they are. He turned to his communications console, making sure that he still had an open channel to the rest of his forces. It is time. Advance the Vanguard for the initial run at them. It was the 25th century. Humanity had risen as one of the prominent powers of the Orion sector under the banner of the Greater Terran Union. Some friends were found and many more enemies made. Wars have been fought. For survival at first, for power and expansion later. History books for children spoke about a golden age of humanity. Stories of unity and of an era of prosperity and progress. The rise of glory everlasting. But the astropolitical reality was never that clean or easy to swallow. In the early 2410s, the GTU backed a rebellion against the Mukaran Domain, one of the main pillars of the Horath Pact, a coalition of various alien states that banded together to oppose the growing influence of the humans and their allies. By the year 2413, the insurrection against the Domain was getting crushed, and the other Pact members were getting involved, prompting the GTU General Assembly to withdraw its support from the failed rebellion. As a last gesture, the Navy dispatched the TSU Liberty, a single outdated dreadnought and its battle group, to oversee the evacuation of Alliance advisors and other personnel, as well as a number of rebels and civilians trapped on the planet of Nrakko, the last rebel stronghold that was about to fall. Unfortunately for them, the Domain's forces moved faster than expected, arriving before the evacuation could be finished. We got incoming! On a direct attack vector! The first officer had the main screen zoom in on the part of the tactical display, showing the approaching ships. The heck are they doing? This picket force is no match for us. Are our screens showing anything else? A second force trying to flank us, that these are a distraction for? The Admiral stood up, looking at the various displays, and trying to find out the angle the Domain forces would be having. In his experience, when an enemy acted like an idiot, something else was going on. Opposition that was somehow powerful but still unfathomably stupid existed only in bad movies. The universe had a habit of weeding out those who were too dumb to live, long before they would rise to become spacefaring, so we do not expect the Mukarans to throw away their lives for no reason either. Could be a probing attack to count our guns. Their main force seems to be holding back on the edge of our detection range, and who knows what else is still on his way. In that case, let's give a measured response. Turn our formation to face them. Give them a few warning shots before they get into optimal range, but nothing else at first. Ready to return fire if they indeed attack, but engage them only if they do so and not with our full power. The Admiral then turned to his flagship science officer. Miss Vanden, I want a sensor burst before they arrive, and then continuous deep scans of the area for anything else that might try to sneak up on either us or the planet. No point in running dark at this moment. I want our sensors at full power, right until something that can actually threaten the Liberty itself turns up and gets close. Sir, might I remind you of our orders? The first officer chimed in. I know, Richard, but what are we supposed to do? Abandon the evacuation convoy? I did not suggest that we abandon anyone, but we can make a show of force instead of luring them in. I doubt they will reconsider their course. They have to see that we are already preparing to leave. Something tells me these guys won't be satisfied until there is a major clash. Admiral Brooks sat back in his chair, watching his commands being carried out. The battle group turned, with its formation remaining intact. The Liberty fired off a sensor burst, lighting up the area enough to illuminate anything that might be still outside of their normal sensor range, but only detected a few extra signals in farther parts of the star system. No major fleet elements elsewhere, no hidden enemy task force trying to sneak by while running silent either. Only a few unidentified small signals here and there, and most of them too far away to be an immediate concern. The Admiral considered his position. His flagship was a relic of a bygone era, hopelessly outdated by certain standards, obsolete even according to some people, but that only mattered if he would face modern enemy capital ships. The couple of cruisers he could see in the Domain Task Force that were sitting back should not have been a problem, especially with the technological inferiority of the Mukarans. But the enemy commander might not have seen it that way. Executor, the observers are here. One of the navigators was pointing at the screen, showing a ship that was slowly approaching from behind. Osnes let out an annoyed snort. He did not need their so-called allies being nosy right now. This was, at heart, still an internal matter, after all. The intervention by the humans was bad enough, but he could shoot at them at least. With the Yabari, he had to play nice. From where he was sitting, the roaches were good for giving them better weapons and not much else, and even at that, everyone knew that they were holding out on the rest of the pact. They are requesting a hypercoms link to one of our Vanguard ships to be able to assist with a cyber attack. They say, and I quote them exactly, sir, they want to deploy the worm? The expression on the officer's muzzle made it clear he himself had no idea what he was talking about. The executor wrinkled his nose, showing teeth. Fine, they can have their link, but make it clear to them that this is our fight. Even if they provided the munitions we are about to hit the humans with, this will be our victory, and ours alone. Not that the Yabari would care, he reminded himself. They likely just wanted to gather more data with which to retreat to their holes and keep scheming. He swore some of their allies were worse than the humans. At least the monkeys did do some of the fighting themselves, if only when they were in a stronger position. Nobody ever saw the roaches fight. On the edge of our engagement zone now, they seem to be turning away. Looks like they want to keep their distance, the first officer reported, while himself looking for an explanation for why the enemy was doing what they were doing. Well, that is rather pointless so far. Are we sure there is nothing else out there? This feels more and more like a distraction, the Admiral frowned. Or they want to do something that needs them spread out, the first officer chipped in. Admiral Brooks nodded. It was not a pleasant thought. He was close to ordering his escorts to lunge forward and teach them a lesson, but he was already doing a creative interpretation of his standing orders by sticking around until the evacuation finished. The bureaucrats at home would love an excuse to tear him down if his ships fired first. And then it started. Missile alarm! They are attempting a long-range barrage. Tighten it up for optimal point defense, and return fire but conserve our main ordnance, the Admiral ordered. This at least made some sense. They did not want to get into the range of his guns. Only it still made no sense in the way that this would be an effective tactic. They had to know how his formation could easily handle any loadouts, carried by a smaller force standing against him. It was unlikely they could do any real damage with whatever they could throw at him at this range. Maybe they hoped his gunners would be sloppy, that they would get lucky with a torpedo here and there. His answer came when some of the missiles lit up before getting hit by any of the point defense guns, and the escorts of the Liberty started getting blown up, not by any warheads impacting, but by short-lived but powerful beams concentrated on the closest ships, which had their armors melted, their systems overloaded and either exploding outright or getting turned into burning wrecks. Damn it! I knew they were up to something! Admiral Brooks hit the arm support of his chair with a fist. He needed an answer to that. Would he order his escorts forward, or try to take down those missiles and the ships launching them before they discharged these beams they were firing? Or would that just result in them getting blasted faster, and should they back off to try and get out of range of the next salvo instead? Here comes the second wave! The first officer pointed to the next set of dots showing up. To all ships, get back! Gain some distance as fast as you can! Brooks barked his order. They had to be using up their capacity fast, with how many he saw getting fire from just a few small ships. Most of his escorts could get out of the way, and it was unlikely there would be a third barrage. Only, his flagship itself was not exactly nimble in this regard. Miss Vanden, I need our ECM jamming those missiles at full power. Yes sir, on it, but there is something else here. The science officer had that panicked expression that told everyone that whatever it was, ignoring it would be unwise. Yes? We got various malfunctions here. Before she could finish, reports from the other stations started to come in. We lost targeting. Comm system down. We cannot reach the other ships. Admiral Brooks watched as everything went to hell in a matter of seconds. The last thing he saw on the screens was a number of those beam missiles coming their way, as the rest of the battle group was backing out. Then, just a whole lot of error messages about losing connection. The bridge was cut off and nothing was working anymore. They were a sitting duck, dead in the water. Executor Oxness wasn't particularly pleased with the results. The special ordnance given to his forces worked to a point. The first salvo of it, anyway. By the second, the humans seemed to have realized the range limit once they were fired. His vanguard was successful in eliminating some of the enemy picket ships, and whatever the Yabari did with their so-called worm seems to have knocked out that battleship at the center of the enemy formation. But at the same time, it proved to be rather resilient even in its current state. The beam missiles that turned on it at the end seemed to have barely done anything to it. Worse, even without their flagship, the GTU forces had no problem retaliating. His vanguard was now retreating, his special munitions having been spent, and the enemy was nipping on their heels with their own frigates, and some strike craft. It also looked like his opposition had reinforcements coming in just now from the other end of the system, and he doubted the enemy flagship would stay down for long. This was not how it was supposed to go. With the element of surprise being used up to such a limited effect, the frontal assault that he had planned initially looked far less appealing now. We need to force them to scatter, to defeat them in detail. Have the Vanguard survivors and the others who would be of little use in a direct firefight spread out and start bombarding the planet if they have the munitions. The rest are free to go around and engage any stragglers or transports trying to leave. Strike Force Row is to run around their formation, see if they can take a shot at the convoy they are protecting. We need to pressure them wherever we can. It took way too long to restore even just basic functionality, like the doors to the command center. Admiral Brooks was losing his patience. We need to get back into the fight. How much longer will this take? Aren't we supposed to be the masters of electronic warfare? As those last words left his mouth, he reminded himself that they were not. There was one other race and their empire who were considered the actual masters and were notorious for it. Even if both the Admiralty and political leadership would dismiss the possibility that their reputation was actually earned. But if they were getting involved, that was all the more reason for him to act faster. Sorry sir, the system reset is not working. Whatever is affecting the computers, it managed to write itself into the startup process. Miss Vandis was still frantically trying to get around their main computer, only to face the reality that secondary systems were also affected. How? Aren't our base systems using a read-only mainframe? Specifically ruling out something like this? That was the old system, sir. It got replaced in our last refit. They wanted us to have the ability to receive continuous updates instead of relying on an obsolete setup. Obsolete my ass, it was working fine. Let's change everything for change's sake by reshuffling the same function so everyone has to relearn it. And updates that would not be necessary if the designers did their job the first time. He rolled his eyes and then it hit him. Correct me if I am wrong, but the controls of our observation bridge were not replaced? That is correct, sir. Right, that's it then. I want a full factory reset of our systems. Back to before our refit. Everyone suit up. We are relocating to the observation bridge. There were some objections, but none could provide a better idea. The observation bridge was at the top of the ship's tower, reminiscent of old sailing ships. It was not supposed to be used for anything else as parades and shows for the media, but it was functional all the same. The real command center was at the heart of the ship, of course, protected deep within the hull. So this relocation would mean they would be far more exposed, which is why the Admiral ordered to suit up with pressure suits. It took them half an hour to make the arrangements, but by the end of it, they had control of the ship again, and they could contact the rest of the fleet. They had an oversight of the battlefield, and news were coming in. What the hell is this mess I am looking at, Sunander? Why are half our forces scattered around the planet engaged in skirmishes? The Admiral was talking to the captain of the Cassandra. Seeing that Captain Taro took command in his absence, and ordered this nightmare of a retreat, with parts of the refugee convoy attempting to leave by dispersing, providing an opportunity to the enemy to pick them off one by one. Sorry, sir. Do not have many options. We got word from command that we are to pull out immediately and without delay. The Thanatos and its support came to make sure we are returned safely. Could only talk down their captain by starting a partial retreat and by informing them of your predicament. Glad to see you with us. The enemy also started bombarding the planet from multiple angles, but the evacuation of the surface is still ongoing. I had to clear my decks of everything we got to intercept their torpedoes, and needed some support for our fighter wings in case enemy warships got closer, which they did. I see, Admiral Brooks sighed. The enemy was putting on the pressure, and probably getting exactly what they wanted. All the while, their own command was telling them to run, and leave who knows how many to their fate. No surprise there. They would rather let a bunch of aliens who are no longer useful die, rather than risk something the fleet was very proud of, never having lost a capital ship since the founding of the GTU. He looked at Tactical, assessing the situation. As thinly as they were spreading out, defending a planet. With their latest orders, his choices were try to do this dispersed retreat, probably get a significant portion of not just the refugee convoy, but his own forces killed, and try to pull together and leave most of the transports out there to die, but maybe preserve his escorts, and that only if the enemy did not decide to capitalize on their state before he could reverse the worsening situation. And of course, in both cases, he would abandon a good chunk of the refugees, anyone still trying to leave the surface. Or he could defy his orders, risk a court-martial and an inglorious end to his career, and live his twilight years in shame, if not outright in a prison. He would also have to find a way to deal with those new beam missiles the enemy used, or he would not even make it to that prison. Then again, he was not the one who needed to worry there, as it looked like. The Liberty was a relic of a time when they relied less on active countermeasures and more on heavy armor. He just noticed something in the reports from the first engagement. While they took down his escorts at ease, the ones that hit the Liberty barely did anything. His flagship's thick armor seemed to be countering them just fine. Sir, we got a message from the Thanatos. Keep them on hold. I already know what they want to say. Open a channel to the entire fleet instead. Before he changed his mind, the Admiral added mentally. The message could be heard on all ships of the Alliance Task Force. To the officers and crew of the Liberty Battle Group, and the rest who joined us for this venture, this is Admiral Arthur Brooks. You all know why we are here, but I wanted to start this with a reminder of what this was about. He paused. Some years ago, parts of the population of the Makari domain rose up against their regime. They did so after our messengers and media filled their heads with dreams and ideas. Dreams of freedom, of democracy, a better way to live as under the boots of petty tyrants who see them as little more than numbers and tools. Ideas that one day we might join hands and whatever appendages some of us possess, in a future where it does not matter which floating rock it was, where our ancestors crawled out of its swamps. He sighed. It was time to swallow the bitter pill. I don't need to tell you how that went, or how our leaders decided it was no longer worth fighting for once the road got rocky. I might even understand the reasoning. An interstellar war between all major factions of the sector is not something anyone sane would wish for. So now we have the last remnants of those who bought into the dream we sold them, fighting for their lives, hoping for rescue, along with their families, and civilians whose only sin is this forsaken rock below us being their home. As I just learned, Command tells us to abandon them and run like dogs with their tails tucked between their legs. He waited a bit again, to let it sink in. Maybe you don't care. After all, these are not our people, not even our official allies, and you are not the one who saw them 11. Heck, who needs a whole bunch of refugees? As if our people did not carry enough burdens already. Just how many problems will this bring? Well, if you don't care about them, then care about our people who are with them. The advisors and support staff. Those of us who did not join this endeavor for some dubious astropolitical gains like our politicians most likely did, but to actually put their lives on the line in the hope of bringing the light of freedom to others. Know that I plan to defy our orders and take the fight to the enemy, to save as many of the refugees and our support staff as I can, and also to show the galaxy that we are not the cowards our spineless politicians make us look like. He yelled that last part. The response was cheers that could be heard even through the noise filters of ship communications. He turned to his own communications officer. Now you can patch in the Thanatos. See what they have to say. The executor was nodding along as the reports were coming in about the enemy movements. It looked like the reinforcements the humans got were just a cruiser and a few picket ships, all of them content to sit around the recovering battleship. His tactic to draw them apart was paying off so far. His opposition was busy chasing around small raiders and torpedoes launched against the planet. It was less fortunate than in the last minutes. Someone seems to have woken up and tried to reverse this fragmentation of their strength, but it would be too little, too late. Message from the observers. Osnis grimaced. What did the Yabari want this time? Their usefulness was rather dubious so far. He did not expect much from the simple text message that was waiting for him before he opened it. On the other hand, the communications between the human ships they intercepted was welcome news. Looked like the human leadership were exactly the kinds of cowards he knew them to be. Order the flanking units to move forward towards the exit point. My lord, won't that leave us unprotected? If they decide to turn around and attack instead. I have it on good authority that they are about to flee. I want our forces ready to jump at their rear before they can enter hyperspace. We can take on their entire battle group with minimal losses. Maybe even eliminate that flagship of theirs. He walked back to his chair at the back of the bridge. He would have preferred to be on the front, but watching the whole thing unfold from a vantage point that let him take it all in had its charm. He watched as the main enemy force detached themselves from the convoy they were guarding, leaving behind only a token escort. Typical, leaving some of the less important ships to die, to pretend that they did something to protect those traitors. Soon he would personally see to their destruction. Wait, wasn't their main force supposed to move the other way? It took him way too long to allow the realization to set in. That battleship and its escorts were not fleeing. They were coming at him with full speed, while his own flanking units with the proper anti-capital loaders were getting further away. Order our ships back, now! We will need their support! The executor shouted. The flanking units? The flanking units, the raiders, everything we have! Get them back now! It is debatable when the Battle of Nrakko really started. Was it when the first shots were fired, or when the Vanguard did its missile barrage? But it was late at night at 27:13 by local time, converted to Solarian hours and minutes, when the major clash involving both sides' flagships began. The tactic by Admiral Brooks to reverse the roles of his ships was certainly not something that was thought in any naval handbook, nor would anyone try to copy it later. The Liberty charged forward on its own, with its ECM jammers on overload, blinding the enemy's sensors and targeting computers, making it impossible for them to get a target lock on any other ship, but also making sure that they could not miss a shot at his flagship. Countless more beam missiles were fired, but could not be used against the other ships of the battle group, so they targeted the dreadnought. The armor of the Liberty was soon glowing red, but the ship itself could withstand the beam barrage. Not only did it not go down, but it was fighting like a wounded beast, tearing into the Mokaran task force like an angry bear putting down a pack of jackals swarming around it. All the while, the Liberty's escorts could encircle the enemy forces and bring down the hammer on them while they were focused on the dreadnought. The rising comet charged forward to meet their opposite, only to be reminded how they were anything but equal. Even in its damaged state and under fire from all sides, the Liberty's heavy guns ripped apart the Executive's flagship like it was a paper plane. By the end of it, the Mokaran forces were mangled and on full retreat, while in total, their forces in the system still outnumbered their human counterparts. Without their leadership, it was turning into a rout. The Liberty itself was now silently floating in the middle of a debris field of its own creation, its twisted and scarred hull still glowing red. Amazingly, most of its crew could still be rescued, along with some of the officers who were ordered to clear the bridge when it first came under fire. But the Admiral and his senior officers did not make it, and there was no question that the Liberty itself would never move in its own power again. It was scuttled right there, after the last of the crew could be evacuated. The rest of the evacuation of Nrakko could be carried out without further major incidents. The posthumous decorations given to the Admiral were controversial, to say the least, as was the monument erected to honor their sacrifice. In the coming years and decades, some politicians and multiple activist groups tried to smear the Admiral and have the monument that was a replica of the Liberty, with the names of the crew and the statue of Admiral Brooks standing in front of it, taken down. But the Mokaran refugees and their descendants, who settled in GTU space, resisted these efforts, until these events were forgotten by everyone but them, and the monument was covered in flowers and colourful ribbons every year since then, on every anniversary of that day.